Good evening, everybody. This is Arun Mehra, and tonight we're talking about financing your first dental practice purchase, buy or squat. And I'm delighted to say I've got Nigel Crossman, who's our head of Samara Commercial Finance, on the call. Nigel, can I hear you? Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear
Excellent.
you. Okay, brilliant. My volume was turned down, but I can hear you now. Okay.
Excellent.
So, right, we will crack on tonight. We've got an interesting webinar subject tonight. We've got actually probably one of the most in demand numbers tonight. We've got just short of about 85 people registered for this webinar. So not everyone's online yet, but let's just crack on anyway. And I know the people who are on here are keen to learn a bit more. So we will crack on. So financing your first dental practice purchase, buy or squat. Now, before we crack on with Nigel, because Nigel's the real expert in this area, I've always been a bit advocate of squats, but I don't say buying is a bad idea either, far from it. Myself, with my wife, Smita, we've set up about 5 or 6 squats now, and created good value. Nigel will paint another picture saying that there are certain benefits of squats, but also certain drawbacks of squats, which there certainly are. And at the same time, the market for buying practices is very active, and he will highlight how to finance your first practice purchase, which I think more and more dentists keep contacting us for how to buy that practice on getting the best rate, best terms for themselves. So should we crack on, Nigel, before I dwell on this?
Yeah, I'm ready when you are.
Okay, so we'll move to the first slide, if I can get this working. Why don't you introduce yourself, Nigel?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Nigel Crossman, obviously, and I'm head of Samara Finance. Previously, I worked for the Royal Bank of Scotland and National Westminster Bank for 38 years, and I finished there 2 or 3 years ago when I joined Samara Finance. At that time, I was head of the healthcare for London and the South East. And that's obviously why I moved on to Samara Finance. We set up a finance company designed to help dentists in the dental market and the healthcare market generally.
Correct. Thank you, Nigel. And I think you'll find that Nigel's got more experience than probably most people out there in the marketplace. He knows everyone, he's seen everything, and there isn't much that you haven't seen, actually, which makes it quite interesting for us. So let's crack on. I'm Arun. I'm the CEO of Samara, been in the dental industry for 15 years. We do accounts, finance, Nigel mentioned, tax specialisms, tenders, and of course practice sales. So we're very active in the whole financial space for dentists nationally, even from the tip of Scotland all the way to Cornwall and everywhere in between. Okay, so let's crack on. So Nigel, go for it.
Okay, thanks very much, Arun. And good evening, everyone, again. Right, so I'm going to go through the slides reasonably quickly because there are quite a lot of them. But hopefully, if you've got any questions, you can send those into Arun and we can cover those off at the end. We've already received a few questions pre the webinar, and hopefully I'll cover most of that as we go through. So buying, we'll talk about buying a private or an NHS practice, or indeed what's called a mixed practice where there's private and NHS income. But generally, the lenders will literally let you borrow between 70 and 80% of the actual goodwill value, including the fixtures and fittings. You seem to have moved on very quickly there, Arun.
Sorry, my fault. Yep.
Thank you. So you are generally, and I keep using the word generally, and we'll explain why I use the word generally, to have a 20% cash deposit. You should be between 3 and 4 years qualified at least. Most banks are looking for a general level of skill, and they are also looking at what other qualities you have learned over the period. So you may have general dentistry, but you may have been doing an implant course, Invisalign, something like that. So it's important to make sure that we're aware of all your skills. They also, and this is a very important one, and one that's missed very often by a lot of brokers, is that you must have some business experience. Moving from being an associate to being an owner of a business is a big step, and they require you to have some skill in management of staff, dealing with a CQC, assisting how a practice runs, not just turning up every day and going home at the end of the day, actually doing some of the actual hard work behind running a practice. If you have family support to assist you, like a parent or a relative who is in business, or is indeed a dentist or a pharmacist or a doctor, then that's a good thing as well. And what's of course most important is you have a very good credit score. So it's important to make sure you check your credit score before you come to us, before you come to anyone, and actually make sure your credit score is in order. Thanks, Aaron.
How do people check their credit score, Nigel?
Right, they can go online, and there are many companies, Experian, Equifax, I think ClearSearch is another one, and they will mostly do it for free. And if it's not free, it's something like £3 or £4, and they will provide you with a credit report. And most of these companies are used by the banks and the lenders generally to search for their own credit information. So it's important to get a copy of your report, study it, and have a look at make sure you're making your monthly payments on time and on a regular basis. And on things like credit cards, they should be fluctuating. They shouldn't just be, in fact, a loan of 15,000 that's been slowly repaid. So they're looking for a good credit score. Somewhere around the 700, 750 points mark is the one they're looking for.
Is that out of 1,000? Is that right?
Out of 1,000, yeah. No, I think it's out of 999, which is a bit weird.
Okay, all right. And in terms of management of staff, obviously associates, sometimes it's difficult because all they're doing
it is difficult.
How do they do that? Any suggestions?
It's about becoming involved. Perhaps taking on a role of mentoring the nurse, assisting with their training, doing their performance reviews, that sort of thing. Yeah. And perhaps with the receptionist. You'll probably find a lot of principals will be quite happy to let you do that, because it takes a weight of work off them, and it gives you good skills. And very often, talk to your partner or your family. They will have the same experience. So for instance, when I worked in a bank, I managed a team of 20-25 people. So I was doing reviews, hiring, firing, unfortunately, salary reviews, performance reviews. So you do all those things as soon as so your friends and relatives will have some experience of that, and it's good to talk to them to understand how it works.
If I can add a little bit further here, I know of a client of mine, they've started up a squat practice, and they thought they hired the right team, and they haven't. The front desk wasn't right, or the practice manager wasn't right, and so one of the associate dentists seems to be very keen to get their hands dirty and get involved. So they're helping out, pitching in, and it's invaluable experience for that associate dentist to see the warts and all of how to run a practice and the issues that they have with patients, with staff, with CQC, all these types of things. So they're finding it very invaluable, and it's really helping the principal out as well at this stage when the team isn't as stable as they want it to be. So if you are an associate, always ask the question, can you get involved?
Yeah.
Okay, so next slide. Right, go for it.
So what else do you need to provide to a lender generally? Well, they'll want details of your own personal assets and your liabilities and your income and expenditure. They'll be looking there for things like, have you bought your own property? Have you bought more than one property? And in many cases, associates have got buy-to-lets as well as their own property. And they'll be looking at your income and expenditure to see that your income exceeds your expenditure. They'll want your last 3 years associate accounts or your SA 302s. It seems weird because if you're buying a practice, the income of the practice is what's going to drive the repayment. But the way they want to look at is how much work you've done. This is particularly relevant with NHS contracts. So if you're taking on an NHS contract with 6,000 UDAs, they want to be assured that you've done that sort of level of work in the past. Your CV is very important. As I said previously, you need to bring out not only your dental experience and the courses you've been on, but you need to sort of explain what sort of other business skills you can bring to the plan. They'll also look in due course 3 months business and personal bank statements. They'll want to be checking that you run your account properly. They'll also want a business plan. So just buying a practice is not just about walking in the door and just carrying on. They'll want to know what changes you intend to make. They'll want to know what impact that has on the business. And they want to know if you're going to provide any more additional services, or bring any specialists in. That will then affect projections, and they'll be looking at projections. So they already have the accounts from the target business that show what it's been doing in the past. They'll want accountant-produced projections to show what you believe it will do in the future. And they're very important, and they need to be they need to be quite carefully thought out, and they need to be ambitious, but not too ambitious, because banks have got their lending credit departments have thousands of dental customers, so they will know what the averages and the norms are.
Okay, and if I can echo what Nigel's saying is, as a firm of accountants, not the finance side of the firm, we've done literally hundreds of projections over the last few years for people buying practices, and it is that fine balance of, you don't want to be too pessimistic, but you also don't want to be too optimistic, because if you're too optimistic, the banks will just say, they'll just laugh you out the door and say, I'm not particularly interested in this, you're just being unrealistic. But luckily for ourselves, we've done so many dental practices that know and have experience of the Samara team of what's realistic, and that's always helped our clients get their finance when they need it.
And the thing with the thing with projections is, Aaron, that I often look at them and change them anyway, because obviously I've got the experience on the banking side.
Yeah, absolutely.
What they'll laugh at and what they'll accept as realistic.
Yeah, exactly. So Nigel's got that experience, which always helps to be Mr. Scrooge in some respects. And then similarly, a business plan as well. A business plan, it's something like, oh my God, how am I going to write that? But it does need thought, it does need planning. And again, myself personally, not just the team, myself personally, I must have written must be about 30, 40 business plans for dentists in the last, 2-3 years. So again, it's just getting that right, pitching it right, so the banks and any other investors are always interested to get involved. Okay, next slide. So I've put another slide in here. Anything you'll add on the financings for buying practice before I talk about this, Nigel?
No, I think all these on here, they're all obviously known to me, and they're all in very different areas, and there's a mixture there of NHS and private, which is good. As I said at the beginning, the banks like an NHS contract, because obviously it's secure income, but they will lend on a purely private practice as well, as long as it's been established and it's in a good area, good location, and the property is good.
Correct. And as you can see, this is just a sample I got from Max Bazzacchini, who's our head of practice sales, earlier today. And we launched a Wimpole Street practice, which is in the heart of central London today, literally today. Then we've got something in Accrington, private, Dorset, NHS, Essex, private, Preston, private, Midlands, a large practice at 1.8 million. So there's a range of different sizes of practices. And I think literally every week we're signing up new practices for sale of all shapes and sizes, small and large, and even groups. So if you're keen to get a practice and you're finding the other brokers aren't being particularly helpful, Max is your man. He knows his stuff. Very helpful, very friendly, and there to support you in your acquisition. So these are just a taste of it. And if you want more, go to our website, samara.co.uk, to find out more. You can sign up to an NDA, and then more information can be sent to you as well. Okay, so let's crack on. Go for it, Matt.
Nigel, yeah, that's all right. What is a seller looking for? It's interesting because most people don't think about what the seller wants from you as well. And over the time, I tend to go out to quite a lot of practices with potential purchasers when I can do. And it's always interesting to hear from the seller what they're looking for in the purchaser. And what they're looking for is they often want to stay on for a period, and because they don't, once they're selling their business, often it suits their plans to stay on for 6 months or a year. It helps you with the handover of the business, but also what you've got to remember is this might be their baby that they've grown, and they're quite attached to it. So they want to sell it to someone they actually like, and it's a bit like selling a house. Sometimes people like to sell houses to people they like. They want confirmation that you've got the finance. They want to understand that you're not just there to have a quick look around and waste their time. They want to know that you've got the finance involved. And they also want to know what your technical knowledge is, and because they are selling you their business, they want to be sure that their client list, their patient list is going to be well looked after, and that you're going to be able to support them as they have, and indeed that you may be able to bring more to the table to assist their clients.
Absolutely. And I think time and time again, we're seeing that the sellers that have a choice of buyers out there, whether it's individuals, whether it's groups or corporates. So they want to make sure that the first job as an accountant to advise to these sellers is, have they got the money? So as Nigel said, have they got confirmation of finance? If they ain't got the money, you ain't going No one's going to be remotely interested in you as a buyer. Okay, and then have you got that management skill set? Are you a nice bloke or lady? Are you going to be easy to get on with? Because quite often they might be staying on for a bit. Is it going to be easy? Is it going to be a nice environment for the team that are staying on to work for you? So hone those interpersonal skills as well, which are very important as well. Okay, next slide. So setting up a squat. Go on, Nigel. Do you want to talk about that?
Always a good slide.
Yeah.
Setting up a squat. So obviously the risks in setting up a squat are more, because you start with no client base and you have to build that. So lenders will only fund generally between 50 and 70% of the startup costs. So, what do you need to do to set up a squat? Probably some of you have been looking at this already, and you obviously need to source the premises. Quite a hard thing to do. You've got to find the right location. You've got to find, hopefully, a ground floor premises. You need to obtain D1 usage, and therefore you need to deal with the local council, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do normally. You need to draw up plans so that you can configure the practice and make the best of the space available, and then obtain quotes for the build and the equipment, remembering that there'll be architects' costs on top of that, and there'll be solicitors' costs. You need to check out the competition, and this is one that lenders really look at quite harsh, because obviously if you're setting up a squat, you could well be in an area where there is competition. Now, it's not a bad thing, but what you need to do is check the competition. You'll obviously be setting up a private squat, and therefore you need to know what is available locally. Is it an area where private dentistry is required? Is it an area where there are other people who provide exactly the same services, and therefore where are they? What are their premises like? What is the welcome like when you go in? You need to write a business plan, as we said, and this is more important obviously for a squat, because you're starting from absolute scratch. So it's got to include things like marketing. It's got to include your plans and how you're going to get your name out there, and are you going to visit schools? Are you going to do local fairs, that sort of thing? And they will also need 3 years projections from you. So it's gone up from 2 years for a buyer in a practice to 3 years. They're looking for 3 years projections, and they want them to be, as we've talked about previously, they want them to be sensible. You've got to remember, on month one, you may well have very few people coming through the door, a very low percentage of income. And what you've got to remember is, when you're doing projections, that you may well be losing money for the first few months, and therefore you've got to be able to cover that as well.
Absolutely. If I had my kind of tuppence worth, Nigel, myself and Smeeta, my wife, who's a clinical dentist, we've opened up private squats since 2004. One in 2004, one in 2006, one in 2010, one in 2013, and literally one last year in 2017. We have a model, and it tends to work pretty well. Sourcing the premises is the challenge. Getting the right location with the D1 is always a challenge, and quite often, the most recent one, we had to find, it was a laundrette, but we converted it to D1 usage. But it's a cracking location in Notting Hill in West London. And now we're 6 months in. Don't get me wrong, there are certain issues in terms of people and staff and stuff that we need to get right, and that's all being worked on, but we're getting 60 plus new patients per month, okay? Because of location, because of how we marketed it, how we've got things set up. So, and how do we get to that point? Because we have a good business plan, we've thought it through, and we're getting the momentum going. So if you get it right, a squat, you can create value very quickly, as opposed to when you're buying a practice. But we've honed our skills over the last 13, 14 years to get to this point. If you're looking to buy that practice and you need income straight away, then maybe buying a practice could be a most suitable option for you. And so there's no right or wrong answer here. It's just a matter of what works for you and your needs and your circumstances. Nigel, you want to talk about what the people will fund or the banks will fund in this situation?
Yeah. I mean, people are quite surprised at what they will fund on a squat practice normally. I mean, they'll cover the build costs, and that covers clearing the premises, setting up of the surgeries, the actual plasterboard in the walls, putting the lighting in, the air conditioning, the decoration, an alarm system, and then obviously the lighting and electrics are very, very important. The equipment, they'll cover the chairs, cabinetry, X-ray, OPG, autoclaves, as we've said on the slide. They'll also cover the reception area, desk, chairs, toilets, staff facilities, computers, and they will allow something for marketing as well. So it's important to make sure that you include all your costs in the application, because obviously that increases the size of your loan as it's a percentage. What you have to be wary of is you've got to look at your practice and decide what you're trying to build. And by that I mean, if you're trying to build a spa and it's going to be lovely, and you're going to, as in one case, someone was going to pay £8,000 for a reception desk, the lender's going to probably look at that and think that might be a bit much. So they will look at things carefully, and they will look at the items that you're buying. For instance, on the equipment side, they will normally on a squat only allow you to fit out fully one surgery. So that's chairs, cabinetry, x-ray machine. You can have an OPG and an autoclave, but only one surgery fully. So you may have room for 2 or 3 surgeries. Now, what they will allow you to do is they will allow you to put up the walls, put the electrics in, and put the water in and the flooring in, but they will not allow you to actually put on the cost of the chairs, cabinetry for a second room. As obviously when you're starting a squat, you're very unlikely to use 2 rooms initially. You're going to use 1 room sparingly initially, and that the percentage of time you spend in that room will increase. Once you get to the actual capacity of that room and you need another chair, then that's the second that you go back to the bank and apply for a second loan or fund it out of your own cash flow.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, and I think it's always nice to have a little bit of a buffer. As Nigel said, you need to put some money of your own into a squat, and then also having a buffer, that always helps in that situation. So in the case of things not always going to plan immediately, but you'll find a way. You'll find a way to do it. Set up perfect.
I've already spoken. I've obviously what the slide was next, and talking about one surgery and fitted, and the other surgery fitted out.
Okay.
What I think what you've got to remember is to fund it. You won't need to be at a squat 5 days a week initially. You can manage with doing sessions. What you need is a good receptionist, and often a receptionist stroke nurse, who can actually direct patients as they come in into the time slots that you are available. This allows you to work elsewhere as an associate and generate income if necessary to cover not only household expenditure, but any losses that you're making in the first few months. So you need to consider that. And staffing levels are very important at the beginning. So receptionist nurse is probably what the bank's lenders will look for, and the days you will work will need to be set up. Now, what we find with a lot of these is that when you look at the competition, I mean, a good example, I did one recently where a squat was set up only 3 doors away from a station, and the other dentists in the area all work 9 to 5. So this is a commuter station, and so the new dentist on the squat is going to work from 7 in the morning until 4 one day, and a couple of other days work later in the day. So he'll catch the commuters rather than them have to go up to London and lose the opportunity to work on them. So it's important to look at the area, look at the things that you can bring that other people don't do.
Absolutely, absolutely right. And I think it's there's a whole webinar and a whole course on this alone that we can talk about how to start up a squat. But I'll come to that shortly. So how can we help, Nigel?
Right. Well, as we've talked about, I mean, in a way, it's almost frightening. There's so much information that lenders require, and there is so much work to do. So the more work you can do up front, the better. So we're talking on this slide about pre-assessment. So what we've done in the past, a lot of the time, our boot camps, which we'll talk about shortly, and in general, when people phone up, I get them to provide me with the basic information, the CV, the personal assets and income information, and their accounts. And from that, I can give them a guide as to what they can afford, what they can actually be looking at to lend, and where they can go with it. Now, the reason we do the pre-assessment is, one, that gives you more confidence when you're going in to look at a practice if you want to buy one, or if you're looking at a site that you want to build a squat in. But when you're talking to a prospective seller, that you have the confidence that you've not only spoken to a broker, but he's given you a guide as to what he thinks you can afford. Now, if you get a practice, what is the advantage of doing the pre-assessment is then twofold, in that if you make an offer to a seller, we can, using the information you've given us and the information that the seller can give us, his accounts and details of his surgery, we can get you what's called an indicative offer from a lender within 2 or 3 days. This is very strong when demand is high for practices. It's very strong to be able to go back and say, right, well, I've got 5 offers from 5 different banks, and I'm going to take this one forward. So it's very important that you can do some pre-assessment work and do a lot of the work up front. And obviously we can help, as we've talked about shortly before. We can help with the accountancy work. We can help with the projections and the marketing. And of course, as accountants, we provide payroll services and we can source the finance. We also, and I think Arun's going to talk about this in more depth shortly, we run what are called boot camps. And we do these in Manchester and London. I think we're doing one in London in, I think, 29th of June.
Yep.
And this is a day where you come along and you are talked to, you are presented to, and we talk about marketing, branding, what makes good customers, location, finance, accountancy. You get everything in one day. And you also get a chance, obviously, to have one-to-one meetings with myself, the accountants, and the salespeople. And we can also introduce other companies, as we said on the slide, to help. We have contacts with firms who provide HR assistance. We can do insurance for indemnity and life, locum cover, and we have contacts who can source properties for you and do the design, the build, and do a turnkey sort of process for you to take a lot of the worry away from you. So this is how we can help you set up your business or buy a business.
Perfect. Right, so we crack on. So as Nigel alluded to here, we run something annually, which myself and Smita, my wife, we started off maybe about 10 years ago, our Samara boot camp, and it's just evolved over the years. Myself, Smita, Nigel, and other speakers come along, and we talk about subjects such as we said, finance, accountancy, branding, marketing, how to set up a squat, how to buy a practice. We have maybe 20 to 30 people each time coming along to this event. And people have gone on to start squats, people have gone on to buy practices, people have gone on to decide, you know what, it's not for me as well, okay? We've realised that owning a practice is not for everybody, okay? But we share our experiences, warts and all, of if it's the right thing for you, you might go away and say, you know what, Arun, I want to buy a practice or I want to start a practice, okay? So it's on the 29th of June in central London. Price is $149 per person or $199 if you book 2 people. And in order to get your space, you need to go to this link. I'll click on this link in a minute, and you can book online. Alternatively, you can call Juliet on this number, 0203 747 3296. I spoke to Jules earlier today. We've only got 6 spaces remaining, as I've been told, for this event currently. So if you want to get on it swiftly, call her tomorrow or book online tonight. If I just show you, it's not going to let me click onto that, so don't worry. Let me try and get this on though. Let me just get this screen. Right, I'll tell you what to do. If you go to samara.co.uk and you go to events, and you'll find the bootcamp link there. You'll be able to book online there. Okay. All the information about what we're going to talk about, myself, Smita, Nigel, and others will be on that link as well. But otherwise, call Jules tomorrow and she'll be able to help. Nigel, to wrap it up, anything you want to share before you go?
Yeah, well, we did have some questions. Do you want me to cover those off?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Right, we had some questions prior to the webinar, so these have been emailed into us. So the question was, to help raise the deposit for the practice purchase, can I remortgage a property to release cash for this purpose? So yeah, the answer to that question is yes, you can. It's always best to do that in advance so that you've got the money available, and then also you know exactly what you can get and you've got it. And so that's perfectly acceptable. Another question was, do banks accept cash gifts to me from parents to help fund the practice purchases? And yes, again, the answer to that is yes, it is quite common. It has to be a gift. It cannot be a loan, obviously, because if it was a loan, it would impact on the bank's calculation of what it could lend to you. So it has to be a gift. But we often see this from parents helping their children. I mean, children, they're adults, buy a practice. But this is how a lot of this works. Someone has asked a question as well. They have a practice in mind, and it's a mixed practice. which is 65% NHS and 35% private. What level of deposit would I require to buy this practice? Would 10% suffice for most lenders? Well, as I said at the beginning, most lenders will want you to pay 20% deposit. And that's a general rule. Some will ask for 30. So it's important. What we find as brokers is important to go out to as many lenders as possible. And I tend to go to the lenders I know can do the deal. And we get you 4 or 5 different offers so you can see the terms clearly on a spreadsheet and decide which way you want to go. You can borrow more than 80%. It is possible to borrow more than 80%, but to do that, you have to provide a charge over a freehold property, probably a house or a buy-to-let. So it can be done, but it is more expensive because obviously the risk is higher for the bank. And the last question I have here is, I've heard some banks do not require a deposit for freeholds and can give 100% mortgages on this. Is this true? And the answer is yes, it is true. You can get up to 100% to buy the freehold of a practice. It's very plausible to do so, especially if the alternative is to pay rent. So in some cases, you'll find that the rent costs are equal or more than the actual repayment of the loan. Loans can often be achieved for freehold properties over 20 or 25 years, very much like a residential mortgage. So it does spread the cost out over a longer period. So they're the questions I've got. I don't know if you've received any others.
Sure, there's another question that's come in. I can answer this. It's, can you purchase a private practice via limited company accounts? And in summary, yes.
Yes.
Okay. When you're buying any practice, whether it's private or NHS, if you've got a limited company, that can acquire the assets of that practice, or it can buy the shares of that practice. It all depends on how it's set up, but it can be set up, and then also the financing and funding for that can be done appropriately as well. So that's not a challenge at all. It's all about understanding what you're buying and is it a good practice to acquire in that respect. And then in that respect, when you're buying a practice, you might want to consider the due diligence of the practice. Has it been looked at? Are you looking at the details? So when we help clients buy a practice, we get our clients to, with them, we go through the financials in great detail. We assess the performance. We assess what the clawback might have been, and look at the financial picture for the buyer, not the seller, for the buyer, if they buy that practice. So that's something to consider if you get to that stage of buying, or to the stage of thinking about buying a practice that you really like. But before you do that, you obviously need to see if you can get the finance. And Nigel, as he mentioned earlier, the pre-assessment, which is completely non-chargeable, is a great way to start off to see, okay, how much can you actually afford? Is it 100 grand, or is it £1 million that you can afford to borrow to buy the practice that you really, really want? On that note, Nigel, any other points you want to raise before we call it a night?
No, just I'd like to wrap up. And if you put the contact details on the screen, if anybody wants to, after, not tonight, obviously, but tomorrow or onwards, if he wants to have a chat, there's my phone numbers on the screen, or you can email me at Samara. I do hold a Wednesday night clinic, which is half-hour slots on a Wednesday night, and people can book into those if they want to. So if you want one of those slots, give me a call or an email, and we can book you in. But it'd be great to talk to anyone who wants to buy a practice, and we're more than willing to help.
Brilliant. And just to wrap up, what we'll do is this is going to be recorded, so this will be on our blog by tomorrow morning. And at the same time, Nigel mentioned his Wednesday night clinic on that blog. I'll send a link out to everybody about booking onto that if you need be for all the attendees. Okay. So on that note, I hope you found this 35 minute webinar, or 35 minute exactly webinar, useful to you. There will be a webinar coming out shortly in the next maybe week or 2 weeks, where we're going to be doing something about a bit more detail on setting up a clinic, and I'll share some more details about that for people. I hope you find that useful. And finally, if you do want to get onto boot camp, which is on the 29th of June, go to the website or call Jules tomorrow on 0203 747 3296 and get it on board. You don't want to miss it. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening, and speak to you soon.
Good night, everyone.
Cheers.